Hi there. Welcome to Theology Thursday. In the Bible, there are a lot of names of people and places. Many of the place names, we just know that that's the name of them. But there are some places we know the name because we're told a story behind the name, or there's something about the place and we know that it's named for something. Some of those are kind of obvious. You get a city like Shechem that means shoulder. It sits on the shoulder of the mountain, that kind of thing. So we have a few of those that make some sense. The word Lebanon means white, which either is because the Lebanon mountains were white during the winter with snow, or probably more likely they were covered with cedar trees, and when they would cut them down, cedar, there's a white cedar, and so the wood would have been white wood, and so that's probably why Lebanon means white. So we have some like that, but there's some others that are really significant. There's a significance put to the name of the place. So let me just give you some examples of those, and I want to talk a little bit about naming things in the Old Testament. So in Genesis chapter 11, everybody in the world is gathered together where they're building a tower, and this was to hold everyone together so that they would all live on the same plane rather than get scattered around, which was a direct violation of God's command to spread out and to fill the earth. And so they were attempting to keep everyone together. And so God comes down and confuses their language. As a matter of fact, Genesis chapter 11, verse 7 says, "Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, so that they may understand one another's speech." And it wasn't to create different languages, it was to force them to disperse around the world. So the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore, its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord dispersed them over the face of all the earth. The word Babel means confusion. So we know that it was named Babel because that was the place where God confused the languages to force them to spread out all over the earth. And then we see, like in Genesis chapter 21, verse 25, we're having an issue over some wells. So when Abraham reproved Abimelech about a well of water that Abimelech's servants had seized, Abimelech said, "I do not know who has done this thing. You did not tell me, and I've not heard of it until today." So Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them to Abimelech, and the two of them made a covenant. And Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of the flock apart. And Abimelech said to Abraham, "What is the meaning of these 7 ewe lambs that you have set apart?" He said, "These 7 ewe lambs you will take from my hand, that this may be a witness for me that I've dug this well." Therefore, that place was called Beersheba. And Beersheba is like the well of 7, representing the 7 sheep. So it's called because the two of them swore an oath. So this is the place where covenant was made between two people. It's not a city. It's just a place. We're going to call this Beersheba, which will eventually become a town. But it's just because there was a covenant between the two of us. Something happened here. So I'll stop and talk about this for a minute. It'd be like you got married, and you remember the place where you got married, and it's the place where y'all entered into covenant with one another. And so it's something very special. Or maybe you remember your honeymoon, and so it's not just like some place on the map. It has some very special meaning to you. And so that's kind of the idea here. They named it because of this treaty between them. Then in Genesis chapter 28, we find a very significant renaming. So in Genesis 28, Jacob, interestingly enough, verse 10, he leaves Beersheba, so that's where he's been, and he's headed out, and he goes to sleep and uses a rock for a pillow, which must have been excessively uncomfortable. And he has a dream of angels going up and down, and it's an indication that God has always been present with him. And so in Genesis chapter 28, verses 18 and 19, we read this: "Early in the morning, after this dream, Jacob took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up for a pillar and poured oil on the top of it. He called the name of that place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at first." So he renames it Bethel, which means house of God, because it says, man, I was at this ladder. I was here at the house of God. So he renames it Bethel. And Bethel becomes a very important place through the rest of the Bible. And it is the house of God. And so we find a place named because of this Places are named because of something God did. Places named because people are in covenant. Place named because God did something significant in my life that was here. And then I'll show you another one that's interesting. In Joshua chapter 5, they've entered into the promised land, and God says, can't do any fighting. You got to stop. Because you didn't circumcise any of the males while you were 40 years in the wilderness. So I want you to take flint knives, not the unclean, unholy metal knives of the land, but flint knives, and I want you to circumcise everybody that wasn't circumcised. So you have every man 40 years and under, basically at this point, is going to be circumcised. And so we read this in Joshua 5, verse 8 and 9. When the circumcising of the whole nation was finished, they remained in their place in the camp until they were healed. And the Lord said to Joshua, today I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you. Because you would cut the foreskin and roll it off. So that's why he said, it's a play on words, I'll roll it away. And so the name of that place is called Gilgal to this day. And Gilgal means to roll. They rolled away the foreskin, indicating they rolled away the reproach of Egypt. And so this place is named because of a religious ceremony that they conducted there. So when you go through the Bible, you see a lot of these places that names have significance, but not just a significance of what happened, but it should impact us even today. It should be something we remember. Man, God did this. God did this right here. He gave this well to Abraham. God did this right here. He met with Jacob to let him know that his promises were secure and sure. Right here is where we began the taking of the land, where we had a circumcision service to get rid of the filth from Egypt and to remind us that God gave us this land. Gilgal was to evoke memories that would lead to commitment. And so I want to show you just a brief video that I did to commemorate a place where my wife and I encountered what we are convinced was an angel of God. And we were crossing the Mojave Desert on a 117-degree day and met a man at a rest area who gave us cold water because the water was excessively hot and nasty coming out of the faucets in the bathroom, and the water fountains were shut off. And so this man gave us cold water, which in many ways rescued us that day. So I want you to watch this video because I went back and filmed it at that place. Well, this rest area is where it happened. In the middle of the Mojave Desert. It was July of 2020. And we got this bright idea that we'd ride across it. It was 117 degrees, plus a brutal sun. Today, it's a gorgeous 75. That was one of the hottest days I've ever experienced in my life. And at this rest area right here, we met an angel who gave us cold water. And it was great. Helped us get the next hour on down the road to where the weather finally cooled off and we had our motel. And in the Bible, they would have named this place something like Malach Shamer, which is guardian angel, because something very significant happened. And so when we read these places in the Bible, some of them, the name is very important because it reminds them. When we show up this rest area today, we were reminded of that really cool day in our life. So this kind of helps you understand sometimes why they name things like they do in the Bible. So anytime we cross the Mojave Desert like that, we remember that place. And we remember how God preserved us. God took care of us and provided for us. And so they would name these places not just to name them because of something that happened, but it actually impacted their present. Hey, God did this in the past, so we know that God preserves us, and so we can trust Him to do so now. And so they were very significant when they would name things. I want to show you one last place that's named and talk about something that I find fascinating. So in Matthew chapter 27, we read about the crucifixion. And so in Matthew chapter 27, verse 33, the Bible says, when they came to the place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull, they offered him wine to drink, mixed with gall. When he tasted, he would not finish it. And when they crucified him, they divided his garment. So Jesus was crucified on Golgotha. Some translations use the word Calvary. It's actually the Aramaic word Golgotha, and we're told it means place of the skull, which may mean that it was a place where lots of people died by crucifixion, so there were lots of skulls laying around. Some think that it was maybe a hill or a mountain that was shaped like a skull. That we don't know for sure, but we know that it was important enough for Matthew to tell us this was the place where Jesus was crucified. We know that it was a historical event. It happened in a specific place. But there's something I find really interesting. We're told where the crucifixion is, but there's no name for the place of the resurrection. This is the place of the empty tomb. I mean, wouldn't it be cool if there was a place we go to today? You know, what's the name of that place? Empty tomb. Why is it called empty tomb? Because that's where Jesus walked out of the tomb. But there's no place named that, interestingly enough. We're not told where it was. So we don't know where the empty tomb was. Been lots of guesses made. If you go to Israel today, you can go to Gordon's Calvary, which is kind of the traditional Protestant location, but we don't really know for sure where Jesus was buried. But we know that he was crucified at the place of the skull on Golgotha, and it was important enough to be mentioned in Matthew. And it is interesting that the place of the skull, which would indicate death, is the place where Jesus died. But the good news is we don't have to know the name of the place to know that Jesus did rise again on the third day. Will someday come to get us. So I just want to take a few minutes to talk about naming places. It is pretty interesting. And when you read some of these place names in the Bible, don't just go, oh, well, that was cool. God appeared to Jacob. Or, oh, that was cool that Gilgal, rolled away the approach of Egypt or something. Man, God did it then, and God is still in the business of doing it, of taking care of his people. That everywhere we go is the house of God. God is with us everywhere, just like he was with Jacob when he's out laying in a field outside the city of Luz and using a stone for his pillow. And he renames the house of God because he realizes everywhere I go, God is with me. Everywhere I go, I'm in his house, so to speak. So I hope this will help you and encourage you, and look for some of those significant places in your life that God has done something. Help it to remind you about God's goodness and faithfulness to you.